Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement's BRN Sunday podcast. I'm Jeff Snyder, your host, and I'm going to be joined by members of the media, academia, and financial services to go around the globe to analyze all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more. So glad you could join us today. We've got a very special guest. I'm going to be joined by documentarian and filmmaker Ted Maniatakos. It's going to be a great story how he and his family, I should say, are dealing with the coronavirus and the pandemic and how it impacts his business, and also some great work he's doing in support of healthcare workers. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the BRN Sunday podcast.
Yeah.
Well, let's kick off our program, as we always do, with the latest look at the top social media trends. And joining me on the line, he is the Senior Financial Services Editor for LinkedIn and also the editor of the This Week in Finance newsletter, which you can find on the LinkedIn platform, Mr. Devin Banerjee, CFA. Hey, Devin, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's beautiful and sunny, well, semi-sunny here in New York. And, I think the haze, the fog of this horrific epidemic is starting to lift, although I want to keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. Things seem to be getting a bit better here in San Francisco and California in general. We've got some reopening plans in place. So, yeah, fingers crossed.
So what might be top of mind for you? I know you were on the network earlier this morning. We're recording this on Friday, just so everyone knows, and we released your segment, great segment, Tale of Two Workers, lots of things going on. But what's top of mind for you and the team?
Yeah, absolutely. So people can definitely go deeper on this story in my network appearance, but a lot of conversation around our data release earlier this week. We're doing it every 2 weeks, called the LinkedIn Workforce Confidence Index, just trying to track how things are changing among different segments of the workforce during the course of this pandemic. So a couple just changes I'll highlight in the recent data compared with the data 2 weeks ago. Well, I'll start with what hasn't really changed. Confidence among full-time employed workers, and this is here in the U.S., has remained pretty steady. Yes, there's some softness in spending, people decreasing spending, people seeing income and wages fall a bit. Retirement account balances still falling a bit, but their savings have inched up a bit, and generally confidence has been pretty steady for them. It's also been pretty steady for the unemployed. Now, on an absolute basis, they're, of course, the segment that's hurting the most. But they have been hurting, unfortunately, at a kind of a steady level throughout this pandemic. And where we really saw a lot of change over the course of April is among freelancers. So freelancers, contractors, independent contractors. There we are seeing their spending really, really drop. 13 percentage point jump in how many of them said their spending decreased during the 2 week period compared with the previous 2 week period. Retirement account balances falling quite a bit. We're seeing some anecdotal evidence in the conversation that people are needing to dip in to those retirement savings, and we're starting to see a little evidence that they're reducing how much they're paying on their debt obligations. So they're probably getting some leniency from their lenders on whether it be credit card debt or perhaps student loans, where the government has a program right now for those federal-backed loans, rents, mortgages, etc. So we're starting to see some evidence that they are decreasing what they're paying on those obligations. So some really interesting data, and people can dive deeper. As I said, we do cuts by industry. The one I'll point out there is education professionals are moving down in confidence quite a bit. They were the biggest mover we saw. And then we're also looking at job function within organizations. So people can check that out on my colleague George Anders, Anders, profile on LinkedIn.
And you said, Devin, this is every 2 weeks. I think you're taking a fresh cut looking at the data. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we're going into the field and releasing it every 2 weeks. We're getting about 5,200 to 6,000 respondents each time, and the team is making sure it's statistically robust and significant. And yeah, the data is jiving with some of the government data we're starting to see. We saw a lot of people talking this week about a lot of fresh data coming out from the Commerce Department in the U.S., including consumer spending, which fell the most since record keeping began in 1959, which is quite scary. That comes as we saw official GDP figures for the first quarter down 4.8% at an annualized rate, the most since 2008. So a lot of, it's interesting. A lot of these small changes, people talk about how they're changing their spending and their saving. But when you aggregate that all together, it's huge effects. I mean, it's effectively GDP, consumer spending, 2/3 of GDP, and everyone's spending is someone else's potential income. And so those small changes that each of us is just human instinct making during this period really adds up to these big figures.
And the thing that really hits home, at least in my mind, is the tapping of the retirement income accounts, 401ks, IRAs, retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, 403bs. I mean, that's going to set people back if you do, and it's understandable to tap into those resources. But if you do that, it could set you back from a retirement, from a tax perspective, and also a retirement planning perspective. That would also, if you look at that in totality across the board in an aggregate, I mean, we already don't have great retirement savings. This would significantly hurt it.
Right.
So.
No, absolutely. I agree. And you and I talked about probably a month ago when the government started, or maybe even more than that. You lose track of time during this period. But when the government started, easing on penalties for IRAs and 401ks for withdrawals and all that kind of stuff. But as you and I both said at that time, certainly not recommended because those should really be thought of in the very, very long-term perspective.
Yeah, definitely choice for last resort. Sorry, Devin, go ahead. What else is top of mind this week?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of conversation around what's happening in the healthcare industry, which I know you always have a lot of interest in, Jeff. But we're seeing this also tale of two worlds in that industry and a real bifurcation. I mean, if you think about it, with healthcare services, all of the kind of emergency procedures and healthcare is really being pushed out of the way to make room for coronavirus treatment. And we're seeing that really take a toll on doctors, everyday doctors, on dentists. They're taking a big hit in this climate. Just under 90% of primary care doctors are reporting a steep drop in patient visits. That was a survey done in April, of course, leading to a fall in revenue, insurance reimbursements, and patients are just canceling non-essential appointments. More than 40% of clinicians surveyed in April said they've had to lay off or furlough some staff. Dentists, we've seen a really interesting conversation among them. If you think about a dentist's office, it's someone referred to it, let me just pull it up, I think it's a coronavirus heaven because of the saliva involved and the equipment involved, which kind of sprays saliva and other fluids into the air. And so we've seen dentists really come out talking about a huge hit they're taking. So that's going to be interesting to watch as things begin reopening, and hopefully that's such a huge industry, and as I said, so many have been laid off or furloughed there. So hopefully that can recover quite quickly.
Yeah, and it's not like we don't need those people. We talked before about the healthcare deserts that exist in some of the more rural areas of our country. The elective surgeries, the things like having your heart done, a valve replacement or other cardiovascular or non-cardiovascular procedures that are important, but they had to be set aside due to the coronavirus. And it's really disconcerting. And I wonder, Devin, I know that there was some talk about possibly doing a stimulus package in the next round of stimulus, maybe. I think it did make it in this last stimulus package.
It did make it, for some healthcare services, but it was pretty small. I mean, a relatively small figure in the context of the whole package. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's going to be the impact. We're not going to know the impact, I think, even in the second quarter where all this stuff lies. And it just shows you, I think for me, just kind of sitting back and thinking about it and being a part of all this, because, obviously my wife and I are impacted. I know you and your wife are impacted. So many Americans impacted, but you don't really think about what the impact is to you. But, we're all in this together. There's a macro economy, and it's interesting. Once you get past the emotional aspects of it, it's interesting to kind of see the domino effect of how things impact this and that and all these other aspects. And clearly, we had the best, in my opinion, the best healthcare in the world. We don't want to see that decline. We want to see that continue to get better and better. We want to incentivize people to become doctors and nurses and support professionals in the healthcare arena.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And yes, it's just one industry that's been impacted quite severely during the course of this pandemic. But as you said, it's a very critical industry, and it'll be good to keep an eye on that one.
Yeah. Well, Devin, always a pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate you, and I know the audience does, that you do double duty every week, and you and the team do amazing work in terms of scrubbing the platform, if that's the right word, scouring the platform to find information, and keep up the great work. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
Bye-bye. Welcome back. Now it's time to shift gears to technology. Joining me on the line, he is the Motley Fool's Senior Technology and Consumer Products Reporter, Mr. Dan Klein. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you?
Doing quite well, all things considered. Looks like the haze, the fog is starting to lift a little bit, which is a good sign, and hopefully, eventually, things can open back up over time. I'm hoping, really hoping. I feel quarantined.
Yeah, a lot more hopeful news this week, some good medical news, or at least possibilities, and definitely starting to see, little things, people being able to get a haircut, to get their nails done, to go back to a gym, even in, different situations than previously. I think that's going to do a lot to brighten the national mood.
Yeah, I think so. And look, I think we're social creatures, and we need to get out, and we need to find a way to do that, but do it safely and make sure that people especially those who are vulnerable, be impacted. And I know earlier this week we talked about getting people back to work, and the first workers were going to be technology workers. Which is right up your alley because we always talk tech with you. So when it comes to tech, Dan, what's top of mind? What have you been thinking about, writing about this week?
Yeah, I mean, the big things this week have been everybody all over the 10 billion Zoom competitors. So, would it shock you, Jeff, if I said that Jcpenney has announced it's launching a Zoom competitor? It's really getting that silly. And there's been sort of a lot of talk of, Google and Facebook have come out and said, yep, we're going to have a free video conferencing service. And a lot of people, oh my God, this will ruin Zoom. It'll kill their business. And I'll point out, Google and Facebook dabble in everything.
Yeah.
Facebook has a dating service. Did that get rid of Match.com? Did that get rid of any of the other? So I am not particularly worried, as I'm not a Zoom investor, but if I was, there's a place for enterprise software, and there's a place for people to kind of fool around, and that's sort of where Google and Facebook are going to be.
But don't they already have tools? I mean, Google's got Google Hangouts or Google Classroom, right? And then Facebook, I think, probably has something similar. So doesn't something exist today, or you're talking more of a corporate enterprise-based solution?
Yeah, they're sort of trying in that area, but the reality is, nobody cares. Like, nobody trusts Facebook. Google has messed this up too many times for it to matter. I mean, have you ever done a Google Hangout?
No, I have not personally.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Okay.
This is not a great product. So I'm not particularly worried about what Google or Facebook are doing. Some people will use it. It'll be a nice casual way when you want to not set something up to have a meeting. But that's not going to replace sort of the corporate use of Zoom. Even, my mom's dance group using Zoom to have remote meetings. Zoom is built for that. It's engineered for that. And just, saying, hey, we have this tool that kind of works. Slack offers video meetings too. We use Slack. We don't use their video meetings. So, I think there's a lot of hype. And I say this in like an investing world. Zoom is obviously priced very, very high right now. And I will point out, Zoom is ticker symbol ZM, and that's important to know because there is a ticker symbol ZOOM. So if you're looking to buy stock, don't buy the wrong one. But
good advice, Dan. Good advice.
This is one of those scenarios where you're going to hear a lot of noise, and there'll be reports, oh no, there was a security breach. Zoom grew really fast. They're rolling out new updates nearly every day for security reasons. I'm just not worried about this product, and in general, Zoom is a really nice, easy to use product.
Yeah, it seems I have used it, with business associates and clients, and it seems to work very well in terms of its latency and transmission of what I consider to be pretty high quality video and audio. Because a lot of times when you do Skype or one of the other, if you're Skyping and you're using Wi-Fi, for example, sometimes there can be a lag between one or the other when you have multiple people in, and I think that's amazing. So it looks like they certainly have hit the nail on the head. And going back to something you said, Dan, before, when I think of Google, I think of maybe the cloud, I think of the search engine, I think of YouTube. When I think of Facebook, I think of news, social media. If I'm an IT manager or a CIO, a chief information officer, I would probably want to rely on somebody who has the infrastructure and the wherewithal, who has worked within the business enterprise.
Yeah, it's going to be Zoom. It's going to be Microsoft Teams. There are a couple of other enterprise products out there.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of pointing out that a lot of people are looking at the stock market, and we're going to talk about the stock market in a few minutes. A lot of people are looking at the stock market, and they're trying to pick winners. And the reality is you should not be day trading. That you are not as smart as the algorithms. You are not as smart as the computers. People ask us all the time, where's the bottom? If we knew where the bottom was, we wouldn't be talking to you. We'd be on our private island somewhere, drinking gold bars or whatever it is billionaires do. Buy companies you believe in and hold them for the long term. If you look at the fundamentals of Zoom and the management of the company and you believe in that, worry about where it's going to be in 10 years, not where it's going to be an hour from now.
So, Dan, would your island be called the Fire Island? Just kidding. Okay, so let's talk about the markets. I want to get your perspective here. I know Microsoft recently came out and said that it exceeded earnings. That expectations, and that's certainly a good thing. The market obviously going through a lot of convulsions is the way I would describe it. Up and down, the VIX volatility was really high over a period of time. But why don't you give us your take?
Yeah, I would say don't look too much at what the market does on any given day. I have to see the market because generally I host a 5 o'clock show every day talking about the market and sort of why things happened. And right now, the reason why things happened are generally very emotional. Yesterday, the market climbed about 600 points based on the barest news from Gilead that they have a drug that might be helpful in treating coronavirus. And of course, people bought Gilead stock. Well, if you look at the financial impact of what that drug would be on Gilead, which is about a $35 billion a year company in terms of revenue, and I'm quoting that off the top of my head, so I might be wrong a billion or in one direction or the other.
That's fine.
But let's pretend that is a $2 billion drug for 1 year that's not that profitable. That's a rounding error for this company. So just because you hear somebody does something and it might help coronavirus, that's not how the stock market works. That's playing roulette. That's looking at the board and going, wow, 8 hasn't come up in a long time. I'll bet on 8. That is not how numbers work. That is not how logic works.
What?
So,
no,
go ahead.
Finish. I was finish your thought, Dan. I'm sorry.
Well, what I was going to say is when you look at Microsoft's numbers, what that shows you is Microsoft is a strong company built to withstand. The numbers I was most impressed by was Starbucks. Starbucks made money. Their sales only dropped by 10% globally. It was about 13% less transactions, but transactions were about 4% higher. All of their stores closed. That was drive-through and delivery business, and they're impacted much sooner because they have so much exposure in China. So this is a company that has so much consumer loyalty that even when you can't go there and order, people would wait in line. I know I've waited 30, 40 minutes in line many days this week to get my Starbucks fix. And that to me is a company that is going to weather this incredibly well. Some companies, you have to go to the grocery store. So the fact that Kroger is doing really well doesn't really change my underlying belief that Kroger is going to get crushed by Walmart and Target and Amazon. But when you look at Costco, when you look at Walmart, when you look at Amazon, those companies are picking up customers. Netflix, Disney Plus, obviously Disney itself is hurting, but Disney came out with plans for how they might reopen their theme parks, done in with the state of Florida. And those will be very slow, very deliberate openings, but you're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. And this is a really good way to know which companies were built for this and which companies are strong and which are not. Don't emotionally play the stock market. If McDonald's comes out tomorrow and says there's a rumor that Chicken McNuggets might, might slow the progression of COVID-19, that is not a buy. That is probably being put out by Grimace or Mayor McCheese. Those are not credible sources.
Yeah, and they might also on the paradox to that is that they might clog your arteries. Dan, one of my biggest concerns. So you talked about some big public companies, big large cap stocks, but my big concern here, and I think our big concern as a country, is these smaller businesses, right? I mean, 50% of Americans work for small businesses. There are numerous, probably too numerous to name or to number. I don't even have a good feel for that, but millions of small businesses here. How will they possibly bounce back from this?
Some of them won't. The problem is we had a federal loan system that was basically a race. So if you managed to get a loan, many companies got payroll loans that if they spend, I think it's 90% of the money on payroll, will keep them operating for a few months or at least paying their people. The problem is some companies got those loans and the employees actually didn't want to be paid because if you're a low-wage worker, unemployment is actually paying you more now because there's a $600 a month supplement. Yeah. So it's a really tricky position to be in. I know here in West Palm Beach, a lot of the restaurants are trying really hard. They're doing meal deals. They're doing family meals. They're doing curbside. But it's going to be ugly because some of these companies were, on the edge anyway.
I agree with you. I think it's not going to be pretty. And look, we had a contraction. What was the contraction? 4.5%, almost 5%. We have all these unemployed people. I think there's going to be more to come in terms of what the economic news means, and what that impact is going to be. I'm sorry.
The one thing I'll say is I discount the unemployment number. Until we get 4 months into this, when we no longer have that federal backstop on unemployment, yes, 30 million people have been furloughed or lost their jobs. The vast majority of those will go back to work. Macy's isn't going out of business. A lot of, Best Buy, a lot of companies that sent their workers home, Ulta Beauty, those companies aren't closing. They're just closed at the moment. Yeah. So those are workers who are actually at home making more money in many cases than what they were making. So I think there's some irresponsible reporting going on. We should be reporting two things: furloughs versus layoffs. We should be looking at the number of, okay, maybe when Macy's comes back, it'll have a 5% workforce reduction, but it maybe had 10% openings anyway. So we don't really know what the numbers are, and we're not parsing it all the well. It's the same thing with the daily reports of how many people have it and how many people died. We have no idea how many people have it.
Or had it.
We do not have widespread testing, and there was some good news this week with Quest Diagnostics and a couple of other companies making tests available. That they're fairly expensive, $120. But that said, if you want to find out if you have the antibodies, there are ways to do it. But any of this reporting, we are not sorting out, that person died of COVID-19, but they were at death's door anyway, or that person, it's a mix. So all of these numbers are really, really squishy, including the unemployment number. So I still expect a pretty rapid recovery because the economy was really, really healthy before this. And if you look at the actual people that aren't making money right now, it's not anywhere near. There's people falling through the cracks. Look, I'm a contractor. I am very lucky that I'm still working. In fact, I'm working about twice as much. But if I wasn't working, I'd be in a position where it's debatable whether I qualify for unemployment. I pay myself and have a company. I pay unemployment, so I should. But it's hard to know if that would be available. And certainly many other contractors don't have the business setup I do, and they're lost in the cracks. A lot of Uber drivers are not in great shakes right now. But that said, I am very confident that if we can get a handle on this, as we seem to be doing, that, come September, things are going to look a lot better than they do right now.
Well, I think a lot of people had their fingers and toes crossed, Dan. Dan, always a pleasure talking with you. Look forward to having you on the network this week. I know we have a lot to talk about in some other areas. We want to get your opinion. So until then, have a great weekend or rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Jeff, I'll see you then.
Welcome back, and we have a very special guest. I'm joined this morning by Mr. Ted Maniatakos. Ted is a documentary filmmaker and also a really good friend. Ted, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you. And I want to talk a little bit about a couple different things. I want to talk about the coronavirus and the pandemic and the impact to your ability to make films. But let's start off with something that you and your fellow filmmakers really recently did. And I think it's a video that you put together kind of showing a lot of great respect for the frontline healthcare workers out there. Can you tell us a little bit about the documentary and what you put together and how it came about?
Sure. So I live in Long Island City, and I come from New York, from a working class family. And currently my sister's a nurse, and my several good friends are either police or EMT employees. So I'm out there clapping, for sure. And a sign across the street from me had said, "Clap because we care."
Yep.
And I thought that's such a great catchphrase or slogan or title for a video. And I right there was inspired, and I started just using social media and, whatever communication I could from my room to employ or inquire favors from several up to, I think, over 20 artists throughout New York City to get some footage. And then it took about a week.
Uh-huh.
Once I got the footage together, I just, I spent some time editing it together, and then I just put it on Facebook, and there's been a really positive response, and people have, reached out to me. People I haven't heard from in years have contacted me personally and just said, man, you made me feel great, and thanks for that video. So
Yeah.
It's good to put something out positive in a time where everybody's not really feeling so positive.
Yeah, it's really inspirational, and I'll put a link to it along with this post. But it really was an amazing collaboration, and you mentioned the response was extremely positive. I know that local news actually featured you or had you as part of a feature conversation about how New Yorkers are adapting. But what other feedback? How was it received from your fellow filmmakers? People that took video footage, gave it to you. What was their thoughts? What were their thoughts, I should say?
There was just a lot of support, to be honest. Initially, it started out, I think I emailed about 50 people,
Uh-huh.
and then I got about 20 to 25 kind of responses. And then I sort of did some of my own scouting of, like, if I saw a post on Facebook, I would direct message the person and say, hey, can I have that shot? I'm cutting a video. But the fellow filmmakers, shout out to a guy like Scott. He was downtown, and he was able to kind of run out and get me some great shots. And then another friend of mine, my friend Ian Meyer, Scott Mason, and then my friend Ian Meyer, he lives in Chelsea, and he was able to kind of go around the area, get some really great, vantage points for footage. And so, everyone kind of pitched in, and I didn't really give any, like particular direction. I just said, this is what I'm going for. And filmmakers just kind of did what they did. And it was really great to just get like a bunch of different artists and like their idea for something, and then get to piece all that together. It's pretty cool to have all that access as an editor,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it came out amazing. And I think what a way to honor the collaborative spirit of so many artists, but also the people who are frontline workers. So Ted, obviously a lot going on, and you and I have worked together on the Roads to Retirement series that we do on our television network. It's an amazing series, and credit to you and Scott Mason for being the backbone, the engine behind all that. But let's talk a little bit about how this situation has impacted you. I always find these conversations fascinating to learn more about the impact that it's had to people. How has it impacted you, your family, and what you do as a documentary filmmaker?
Well, all things considering, I keep saying out loud that my fiance and I, we're some of the lucky ones in terms of, the scale of our world and our society. I'm always just grateful for, who I am and where I'm from. But, as far as my business, I've been completely dry. Yeah, so I've taken the time to. I mean, I was thinking about you before we talked because there was an article I posted on LinkedIn that you liked, and it was, it was like productivity is not working, and it was like sort of the idea about people that like come from the last 10 years of the workforce, this sort of millennial kind of overworking, burning the midnight oil kind of work culture. So now all of a sudden we come to like a screeching halt, and so it's it was a little bit of a kind of a shell shock to be like, okay, now I have nothing to do, and I'm so used to being booked out for like 6 weeks where I'm like, okay, I have so much to get done, and constantly trying to find time to do even have a personal life, and now all of a sudden it's just you're kind of stuck. So it's more like, how do I make use of the time that I have now that I've never had as a professional adult? And that's been a sort of a fun experiment.
So what have you been, I know obviously besides putting, Clap Because You Care video together, and I saw some other videos that you would put together, some more humorous videos, but how have you been filling the void, the time? Because your fiance is working, right? She works and she's working remotely, but how have you filled the time? Because she probably wants you to leave her alone a little bit so she can work, I would imagine.
So I kind of just like, I have a big book collection that I haven't been trying to catch up on, a bunch of books, and then, I have so much old footage, and I have just been spending time, doing that classic backup media, going through old photos and kind of things that I've always sort of left like, unlooked at for a while because I've been just so caught up in trying to make money that I'm like sort of kind of going through that stuff. And then also, good old fashioned relaxing. I haven't done that in a while. So, sometimes I just like, I've been trying to take advantage of what time I have, and just because I know at some point I'll be working a lot and saying out loud, like, gosh, I wish I had some more time.
Yeah.
So I try to live in the moment, and I'm confident that this will pass. I definitely have kudos to all their, again, frontline essential workers, and then our politicians, everybody that's out there doing their part to, combat this virus is really helping us. And I'm confident we're going to get back out there. And we're going to be stronger than ever. I think, with struggle comes progress, and I think our society is going to really kind of unite in ways we haven't, and compromise in ways that we haven't. And I think I'm positive. I'm optimistic for the future. I hope I'm not alone, but I am.
Yeah, I do not think I think you're very optimistic. I think there are a lot of people who are optimistic that we'll come through this because we've had big challenges. Ted, I want to ask you a question because I know you and I have chatted throughout our journey together on Roads to Retirement. You mentioned that you're a millennial, and you had the experience of going through 2008, and I had the experience of going through 2008. I'm a little bit older than you are. I'm a Gen Xer, I guess, if you want to define me. But how, kind of bookending, looking at your career, and you've had an amazing career. The work you do is amazing. You work for some amazing clients and customers and putting together amazing content along with your colleague Scott Mason. But just a little, having the time to kind of reflect, starting your career around the 2008 financial crisis and now kind of going through this, what does that mean to you? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, again, 2008 now, I hear it being called the Great Recession, sort of modeling the Great Depression. So it was kind of it's definitely different, I suppose, to starting your career at a time when the economy is really, really doing, obviously at its worst in a long time. So to start your career that way and then to watch it go, it got pretty great. It was, the economy was doing awesome the last couple of years. And now to sort of be in a place where we're kind of like in the unknown, I mean, I guess it teaches you that the market, does go up and down. And, that's what people that are older than me have always told me, like, don't be afraid to invest because, things swing back. And if you believe in, America, if you believe in the economy, then you're going to get, the markets will come back. So I've definitely had a big takeaway, like, not be afraid to invest during this pandemic while the economy is down. So that's another thing I've been doing in my downtime is watching the market and start paying attention and seeing like, okay, like what stocks are going to do well. And just definitely keeping an eye on my already investments that I have, my already retirement accounts that I already built.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And Ted, I mean, you have built up a really good list of clientele over the years, and they keep coming back to you because of your great work. But any advice out there for some of your fellow documentarians, fellow filmmakers, maybe others who have not yet established themselves, some lessons that they can take away, maybe before and after these turbulent times?
I mean, I guess what lessons do I tell myself every day, and then I probably don't listen to? I guess just patience. I think that's something that we think everybody, especially in the creative business. I mean, I heard like somebody once said that life takes long and art takes longer, and it's always been a process of like, you know, trying to keep your confidence up. And I think patience is a virtue in our field that, you know, you got to just listen to, and all things come, and all good things come with hard work. Mm-hmm. And that's all I can say to anybody who's in a tough time or, you know, starting out.
Yeah, it's about dealing with adversity, and these are challenging times. It kind of proves yourself as a person and how you handle. Everyone can do well in a good time, right? But if you have a challenging time, it's perseverance. And yeah, I mean, I think we talked about the financial crisis, talk about this, and how it kind of ended the start of your career. But I think we all go through all different types of challenges, and it's that perseverance and desire to move forward that kind of drives us all. And I think I share your optimistic message, and I think New Yorkers in general are very optimistic people, wouldn't you say?
I think currently, not historically.
Okay. Well, I like to think that maybe currently then that they are very optimistic people. New
York has evolved to a very altruistic city, but it's historically like has its rough edges, obviously.
Yeah. Well, Ted, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit about your story. Again, I'm going to post the video, the Clap Because You Care video. It's amazing, and anyone who I'll tag Ted in as I always do with all of our guests. And if you want to reach out to him, LinkedIn is probably a great place to start, right, Ted, to reach out to you for things that you do?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Ted, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning. Inspiring story, altruistic and collaborative, and look forward to working with you again on Roads to Retirement and doing some of the other things that we're planning to do later this year.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Take care, Ted. Bye-bye. Welcome back. We're going to talk market sound. On the line, he is the lead anchor for the TD Ameritrade Network. You can certainly check it out and should check it out. Mr. Oliver Rennick. Hey, Ollie, how are you?
Yo. Hey, Jeff. Doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's been wanted to check in with you because, I trust you and Kevin Kelly to really break down the market events. I don't ask what's going to happen because I don't think, in my mind, no one's going to really know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I love how you break this down for the audience and your audience and for the audience in general. So take us through the week.
Thanks.
What's of course, and take us through the week and tell us from your perspective and the network's perspective what you all kind of found.
Yeah. This week was, again, every week has been pretty interesting. The volatility of the market continues to slow. So by some definitions of craziness, it's a little bit less crazy. But some still really important developments and a week where stocks are looking like they're going to end basically unch. But we had a lot of pre-market and futures activity coming into this week. And generally that's kind of been the pattern now is stocks climbing. So the default kind of state has been higher stocks for now the better part of a month. Now, over the last 10 days, it's been, for the most part, kind of slowing down some of those gains. But we did ramp pretty hard for the first half of the week and then faded it. So basically, over the last 10 days now, the market hasn't really gone anywhere. And for these 5 days, the market hasn't really gone anywhere. But there's been no shortage of big events that are telling a really important story. And it's basically two-pronged. One is that the equity market is really the only asset class that is pricing in some degree of hope that this is not as huge of a depression or Great Recession-like scenario than people thought in late February, early March. That's really the first thing that's important about the stock rally. And then the second thing is that there's two main reasons for that. One is because tech companies and so much of the NASDAQ is able to survive in a stay-at-home and work-from-home environment. Mm-hmm. There, so far, is not a deep enough economic collapse to really hit the need for data center build-outs, the need for workplace productivity software. In some cases, it's actually illuminated or even pushed forward some of the value proposition for mid to smaller companies on the tech and software side. And then on the big tech side, we just really see how it's just painfully obvious who owns the future. And it's Amazon, it is Netflix, it's Facebook, still amazingly, it's Alphabet, it's Apple, and all these earnings from these companies were very good on a relative basis to the rest of the market. Now, they all still kind of had their own hang-ups on why they weren't perfect, but the market largely rallied in anticipation of much of these tech companies, not just the big ones, but others in the chip space as well, that they are not falling apart right now. Now, they're not exactly thriving. A few companies are. That list is very limited. But there's a pretty long list of companies that are surviving this. And I think basically what happened at the end of the week is the market was rallying in anticipation of these things. And then when they arrive, there's a little bit of a kind of just selling of the news event. And then, of course, the second big proponent here, which is an even bigger one, is that there's just a huge amount of still stimulus coming into the market. And even though jobless claims are now like upwards of 30 million since this thing started, it's hard to really figure out how that data point what that data point means if so many of those people are still getting income and paid at an equal or sometimes greater than rate than they were before. So those two things combined, tech market resilience and that economy still functioning, and the just huge amount of government assistance has been a really crucial factor for why the stock market is so optimistic.
And Oliver, you bring up tech, but what about the Walmarts of the world? You mentioned Amazon's kind of is tech, but also quasi retail. But the large food companies. I mean, we need to eat. These are like they're doing really well. Relative, and financial services kind of really look. I mean,
Walmart, Kroger.
Yep. I mean,
those are all doing well.
All doing well. So, I mean, there are different. It's really interesting to see because we had this doom and gloom that we all kind of felt. I think it was part of it was like the emotion of being locked together or alone. Being alone for so many days and weeks in our houses, apartments, etc. So we all felt this doom and gloom. But it seems like. And I don't want, knock on wood, I'm knocking on wood if you can't hear, that it seems like we've kind of been able to ride it out, at least so far, but maybe, obviously time will tell.
Yeah, speaking of which, right, currently outside my apartment, I can hear protesters arguing to reopen the economy. And that played a little bit of a role this week, too, because we saw some of the states move towards reopening. There seems to be a good bit of pressure building for the economy to reopen. As virus growth rate and new cases rate continues to fall off in the U.S. The news on Gilead's potential to have an effective treatment for COVID-19 patients is a really big deal because anything that moves the timeline upwards for a return to normalcy is really the most important thing for a return to corporate earnings and a return to economic stability. So the market really responded to that quite strongly. That surprised me at first, but when you really think about it, it makes sense that those type of events, these drug developments, will be probably some of the most important potential catalysts for the market in the near term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe you misheard what the protesters were saying. They were saying they want more of the TD Ameritrade network. They wanted 24 hours, which I don't know if you can do that, but if they could do 24 hours of TDA network, I think that's what they want. Oliver, thanks so much for. Always appreciate having you on the program, and I know you're bookended. You bookend the programming. Always a great time watching Oliver and the amazing guests he has had, and also you can check out your narrative. Right, you post a narrative newsletter on LinkedIn every week, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it's on my LinkedIn, and we also have TD Ameritrade Market Minute newsletter. You can go to on TDAmeritradeNetwork.com. It's basically the same thing. I just kind of repurpose it and continue to try and build the story of what the market is doing.
Absolutely. Well, Oliver, always a pleasure talking with you. Stay safe, enjoy your weekend, and hopefully the weather is nice out there as well.
You got it. Thanks, man.
Welcome back, and now we're going to talk real estate. Joining on the line is Market Watch's intrepid real estate reporter, Mr. Jacob Passy. Hi, Jacob. Happy Friday afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing as well as we all can right now. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I mean, all things considered, we don't have it that bad. But yeah, doing okay. And I know you're across the river from me in Manhattan and in the Brooklyn area. Doing okay? You guys doing okay otherwise in terms of dealing with this?
Yeah, wish I could get outside more and whatnot, but staying safe, staying healthy, that's the most you can really do right now.
Absolutely. So, Jacob, let's just jump right in. I mean, we talked last week about real estate, and things still seem to be in flux, although I have been hearing from people that some real estate markets are beginning to open up where they can actually show properties. But you tell us, what's top of mind for you this week?
Yeah, so first off, mortgage rates hit another record low this week. They had been kind of near record low for a couple weeks now. They last hit a record low back in early March, but then higher and stayed higher because of issues that lenders were facing, and lenders are still facing a lot of those issues. The lending industry, the mortgage industry has kind of calmed down a bit from where we were back in early April when there were you name it, all the kind of issues that the mortgage industry could. Rates were able to drop down to another record low, which is kind of a big deal for folks who were looking to refinance a couple months ago, but didn't really get around to doing so. Back in early March, there were also lots of folks who were facing the possibility of it taking 40, 60 days to close their refinance application because of how much of a backlog of applications lenders had at that time. So, if you didn't have, rate locks only last so long. So the good news is if your rate lock expired, but you're still waiting to hear back from your lender, well, rates have come back down again. But things are a little different compared to March in a few important ways the last time we hit an all-time low. So while the average rate for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, according to Freddie Mac, is 3.23%, that applies to loans that are bought by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, which are called conventional loans. So if you're getting a loan that's not a conventional loan, you will see different rates out in the market. So that includes FHA loans, VA loans, jumbo mortgages. So any loan that isn't bought by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that is not tracked in this Freddie Mac report, which is kind of the leading standard kind of in the industry for tracking mortgage rates.
Interesting. And, Jacob, when we talked before all this crisis and we talked about mortgage rates coming down, there was a plethora of people who tried to refinance. And I think when we had talked, these mortgage companies were staffing up. We've had this event go on where we have all these unemployed people. Companies have been furloughing. If someone does submit a refi now, are these companies staffed up, or do they have the ability to restaff quickly to deal with the surplus of requests?
Yeah, so the companies have definitely staffed up. They've definitely been hiring. You've seen companies like United Wholesale Mortgage, Better Mortgage. They have been hiring in droves, which is good news for folks who are unemployed, right? Because they can actually get you might be able to get a job at a mortgage company right now, which is good for folks who are jobless as a result of the coronavirus situation.
Yeah.
At the same time, while the staffing situation is not as much of a concern, the concern for lenders now is the issue with regard to forbearance. So, at this point, about 3.5 to maybe even 4 million Americans have requested forbearance, meaning they can skip mortgage payments for up to a year because of economic hardship they're facing to the coronavirus situation. And so when you're talking about that many people skipping mortgage payments, that makes matters really tight for lenders. So as a result, lenders have had to increase the standards for loans. So you have to have a higher credit score than you used to at many lenders now. Many lenders are requiring larger down payments, which may not be as big of an issue if you're refinancing, because if you've been paying your mortgage on time every month, you probably have a fairly decent credit score. If you've also been making payments towards your mortgage, hopefully you're at the point where you've been paying off some of the principal, not just the interest. And so with all that in mind, hopefully you've built up issues. If you're trying to refinance and you only put 3% down, and now you've built up to the equivalent of a 10% down payment, unless you have that extra 10% in your bank account that you can put towards the refinance, you may not even be eligible at some lenders.
Interesting.
So that is an issue that some people are going now. The other thing to keep in mind is you can't really pull a fast one over a mortgage lender when it comes to income documentation and things like that. So if you have lost your job but are thinking, well, I can refinance and get a better rate and, do that, rather than go through forbearance or something. I don't know why someone would think that, but let's say they were thinking that, mortgage companies have also started imposing, different standards for when they check whether you're employed and how much income you make. So, the law or by the rules set in place by regulators is that they have to, that lenders have to do income verification at least 10 days before they close a loan. Some lenders have now pushed that to same day. So they are at a maximum 10 days before they close a loan. So some lenders are now doing that same day, meaning they're, the day you're going to sign the documents, cross the I's, cross the T's, dot the I's, they are looking from day to day. So, and the last thing a lender wants is to, approve you for a refinance and then for you to turn around a week later and say, oops, lost my job. Can I get, can I skip mortgage payments now?
Yeah.
So, so that's, they're going to be looking really closely at any loan that they are going to do right now and be a bit more stringent in the underwriting process than they, might have been, 6 months ago.
Yeah. And I was going to say, Jacob, I mean, that just seems to make sense to me, just given the circumstances. I mean, you have to be flexible in terms of giving people opportunity, but if you're not earning an income for whatever reason, highly unlikely that you're going to be granted that loan, or at least at the best rates possible. Jacob, one other story that I thought was really interesting that you wrote this week, and it just seems to make a lot of sense, but I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about it in the next couple minutes, is Americans will cut down on the home remodeling projects because of what's going on. And that just seems to make sense to me, but what was the rationale there?
Yeah, so, it does make sense. Remodeling is an expensive thing to do. Some folks might have been hoping to get, a cash out refinance loan or something like that to pay for a remodeling project. But as we've just discussed, it's a little harder to get loans right now and could take a little longer. So, that's maybe not as much of an option. So obviously, when folks are losing jobs, losing income in mass numbers, that means lots of homeowners won't have, the money set aside to handle both, the loss of a job and remodeling project. Or even if you still are employed, you might be worried about, whether your job is going to cut your salary or start layoffs. And so therefore you may not want to, commit yourself to a big remodel right now. But what's interesting is the bigger driver really actually is the home sales market. So a lot of people renovate their home in order to sell it. They're trying to, spruce it up because they're hoping to, get a, better list price and better, sale price on their home. They spruce up the paint, add on that addition, whatever it might be. They're doing that to hope to appeal to buyers. But, right now, most Americans believe that it is not a good time to buy a home. And so I think, that's leading a lot of Americans to rethink, should I be doing my remodeling project now or wait a year or two? If the housing market's going to, if the sales market for homes is going to be so depressed this year, I might be better off waiting to remodel next year or the year after, because also, keep in mind, styles and tastes change, so you don't necessarily want to, redo your home to what's in vogue right now. and then turn around a year from now when you finally can sell your home and find out, well, everyone now likes blue walls rather than purple walls or whatever it might be. So I think that is, the other factor here is, the sales market, and this just shows how, a downturn in sales has such a ripple effect in the real estate industry. It doesn't just affect, home buyers and sellers. It also affects construction firms. And then that has the ripple effect in the economy. If home construction firms have less work to do right now, will they have to start laying off folks as well?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, when you're saying that to me, I'm thinking about not only the construction firms that we just talked about, but the Home Depots, the plumbing companies, the electricals, right? I mean, all those people kind of get engaged to, usually if you are redoing a big rebuild, or you're adding an addition or a new roof. I mean, this impacts many, many different people, and it really shows you the complexity, the economic complexity here. Well, Jacob, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for coming on the program this afternoon. Really enjoyed it, and stay safe, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Talk next week. Take care.
Bye-bye. Welcome back. Now we're going to talk a little retirement online. Joining me is Market Watch's intrepid retirement reporter, Miss Alessandra Melito. Hi, Allie. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing okay. I think we're in like week, 6 or 7 of this quarantine? And
yeah.
Doing okay, looking out the window, yearning for the ability to go out when I can without a mask, but we'll see when that happens.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's been top of mind for you? Retirement, savings, and all those issues don't stop while we're quarantined, and actually they're probably top of mind for so many Americans right now.
Yeah, so for me, top of mind is the fact that many Social Security and Supplemental Security income beneficiaries have still not received their stimulus checks. So that was something that, Americans are getting these checks earlier this month or earlier last month in April, now that it's May. But I have heard from numerous people that there's inconsistencies with, those who are receiving their stimulus checks and those who aren't. The question isn't if they are eligible. They are eligible because that has been said over and over and over again by the government. But some people have gotten, some Social Security recipients got their checks this week, and others were supposed to get their checks this week, but they haven't. And then others might not get it for another couple of weeks because there are other deadlines associated with, if you are on SSI and you have a dependent child. And then there are others who maybe didn't have direct deposits. They have to get their checks via mail, and that will take, significantly longer because the government's doing 5 million or so at a time.
Wow.
Something like that. So yeah, these are people who are retired, disabled. They might be a survivor. They might be low-income families. And, unfortunately, a lot of people who are, a lot of beneficiaries rely on their Social Security benefits. So it is nice that, at least, the actual benefits are coming through on time. But, when they heard that they were getting the stimulus checks, that was a sense of relief, with all that's going on in the world and the financial stresses and emotional stresses and people getting sick or family members losing jobs. They were, looking forward to having that extra benefit, and they're still waiting.
So did you do any digging as to why they're not receiving their stimulus checks? Or I'm assuming by checks you also mean their direct deposits, because they may be getting their Social Security by direct deposit, but any rhyme or reason as to why?
No, no rhyme or reason. So
Allie?
Transparency. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, I'm sorry, Allie. I hit the mute button, Allie. I apologize. But any rhyme or reason as to why this may have happened?
No. So there is no rhyme or reason. Transparency hasn't been the best lately, and the government can't be too much at fault for this because we are in the middle of a crisis. They are doing a lot. It's just there are so many questions that haven't been answered yet. So there are a few reasons. why somebody may not have received their check yet. If they are getting it by mail because they don't have direct deposit, that's automatically going to take longer because the government has to actually issue these checks and send them out. But if you have direct deposit, there's really no particular reason why they wouldn't have gotten it yet. I know that they are doing different waves, they once a week or something like that. You do see these tweets like, oh, I got my stimulus check finally, blah, blah, blah. But there isn't a reason why somebody who is a Social Security beneficiary, whether they file taxes or not, but they have direct deposit, there's no reason why they wouldn't be eligible to get it sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
I reached out to the IRS and they said that there are different deadlines and people should start seeing if they receive Social Security, they should start receiving their checks this week. But a lot of people still haven't gotten it yet, and it's just there are a lot of moving parts. But there's no exact. It's not like this thing is stopping people from getting their checks. It's just, chaotic.
Yeah, it just sounds like it's record keeping and system related, and also, if you don't have the direct deposit information online, that's challenging. But I think you made a really good point, and it's these folks who have fixed incomes. This is really where the stimulus is meant to be, right? It's people in fixed incomes, lower income, where they need the additional money. They may have lost their job. They may be furloughed. They may not be able to afford certain things today. And this is really would be a nice sense of relief. So hopefully people can get them soon. Allie, can people reach out to the administration, Social Security Administration? Is there like an 800 number that people, like a customer's call center that people can call, or is that just unheard of?
Honestly, I don't know if they would even want to try because just like the wait times to call any government agency lately has been really, really long. But from what I've seen on the IRS's website, when you go to like the FAQ section and try to find more answers about the economic income payments, they normally advise like don't call, just follow the directions that we're giving you on this website. And they have over the last few weeks, they have been adding more information to the FAQ section so that people in all sorts of situations can learn more about like what pertains to them. Like, for example, the SSI and I think Veterans Affairs beneficiaries, if they have dependents, like child dependents that are eligible for that extra $500 in the stimulus money, then they have to file by, I think, May 5th so that they get that extra $500. If they miss that deadline, I think the week before was Social Security had that sort of deadline. If you miss that deadline, you'll still get the money, but you won't get it until next year when you file your taxes for 2020. So, they do have a lot of information on there, but calling might be, I don't know, you might be on the phone for hours.
Yeah, and that's the case, by the way, with a lot of different banks and private sector too. So it's not just the government.
And unemployment. That's something that I've heard a lot. State unemployment agencies have been bogged down with phone calls, and you might be waiting like a whole day to get to hear back or to get through.
Yeah, I'm sure it's really frustrating. I think people just need to, do the best they can, and let's hope the government can get those batches of checks out. Because you're right. I mean, if you have all these million Americans who are supposed to receive them, and they have to print checks. It's going to take time to do that. Put it in the mail. Then it takes anywhere from probably 5 to 7 business days in order to get that into your mailbox. Allie, one story I wanted to ask you about, and I think you wrote about the Gallup poll results that many Americans, even with the global pandemic, haven't really changed their retirement plans. Any thoughts about that poll? I mean, that was really interesting, I think, given, maybe there's some lagging information there when the polling was done, but any thoughts that you have about that?
Yeah, so the polling was done earlier in April, and maybe that was too soon for people to really determine, like, wow, this is nothing with my plans. But the people that they surveyed, they were all different ages. So for somebody who is in their 20s or 30s, like, you know what, it might really not affect their retirement plans. Maybe they're not contributing as much if they lost a job or had reduced income, and they can't put as much money into their retirement savings. But they're not going to be thinking like, okay, in 5 years I have to retire and I don't have as much money as I did, 4 months ago, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
So the younger folks, they might not feel that there are any issues. But it really depends. I've spoken to different financial institutions about how 401k savers are doing during all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that for the most part, they're really not making many changes. Like some of the people who are closer to retirement, they might make 1 or 2 investment allocation changes just to be a little bit more conservative for the time being. But overall, people have really stayed the course, which is nice. Unfortunately, like with many things, there's still a lot of uncertainty as to when this will end, when economies will open up. Even when states do decide to open up, they are going to do it very slowly, which means that it's not like they're going to say on May whatever everything is open,
yeah.
stores and schools and malls and all that stuff. So we don't really know how much longer this will be, and obviously the longer it is, the more it could shake a retirement plan, even if it is one that's in a couple of decades. But yeah, for the most part, people have said, at least in the beginning to middle of April, that they are staying clear and they are making the most of the situation as far as their retirement plans are concerned.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I know you talked to a lot of different financial experts and even some of the record keepers. With the passage of the CARES Act and the allowance of more liberal loan requirements, you can now go to 100,000. You can take a penalty-free withdrawal. Have you heard any, at least anecdotal evidence that people are not taking those distributions, or are they tapping into their retirement accounts?
So I saw data from the first quarter, which happened, it obviously ends at the end of March, and that was only a couple of weeks after the CARES Act
mm-hmm.
passed. And, so from that data, it doesn't show that there were many people who took loans out. There was a slight uptick, I think, in Fidelity, but it was like a fraction of a percentage point. But again, that was also in March, and like March was just the beginning for most of the U.S. when it comes to this coronavirus crisis. So I would be really interested to see what happened in April, but there hasn't been too much as far as like data points. As far as anecdotally, some of the experts that I have spoken to, they've said the same thing. Like people really, for the most part, aren't tapping into their retirement plans, whether it be through a loan or a distribution. And there are numerous reasons. They might have other assets. They might not have lost their jobs. They might just be working from home for now. But again, just like with everything else, there is a lot of uncertainty, and that is something that financial advisors are worried about. We might see an uptick this month or next month. Especially as more people are becoming unemployed, and just the fact that you lose income, you lose jobs or reduced income.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to pay the bills. So. That's something that's on a lot of people's radars, but as of right now, there isn't a lot suggesting that people are running to their financial institutions to tap their retirement savings.
Yeah, I have one more last question for you, Allie. Is it your sense that people are watching the stock market each and every day? I mean, people are home, right? We can't go out. We oftentimes reported in the press as the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and seeing that number. Do you think more people, just from people that you're talking with, whether they're shareholders, investors, just real Americans, are they following along with where the Dow is on a regular basis, where the indices are?
I don't think so. I think after all the market volatility that happened in March, I think a lot of people just got turned off because the anxiety
Yep.
of watching it go up and then drop significantly, and then kind of go up and then drop significantly. Like that's a lot on a person.
Yeah.
I did talk to people who are part of the FIRE movement, Financial Independence Retire Early,
Yep.
and a lot of them said we don't check that often because you could go crazy doing that. But for the most part, generically speaking, I don't think a lot of people are zoned in on the indexes, because I think if they were, they would they would not be able to sleep very well at night.
Yeah.
So I think for the most part, from the people that I've spoken to, or like, on Twitter, what I read, or even just my friends, once in a while they'll like, log on to a site like MarketWatch, and they will see what's going on, and they'll be like, okay, this is the snapshot for the day, and then they'll take the break, because, tracking it, if you're just an everyday person who does not work on Wall Street, there's really no reason why you would have to do that. Like, you should not be logging onto your 401k account to see how it's been impacted for the day or the week. It doesn't help anybody, and it will only make you stressed out when, things are looking downward. But yeah, for the most part, I think people are trying to tune out as much as possible, at least on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's why the Gallup poll is in some ways really positive. Well, Ali, always great to chat with you, and I agree. People should definitely check out the MarketWatch.com website, because they can check out both Alessandra Melito and Jacob Passy and so many other great writers as well. Ali, have a great weekend, and we will talk to you again next week.
Yeah, stay safe. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Welcome back. Now it's time to close out our show, as we always do, with a very enlightening and enjoyable discussion with the Legal Eagles. They are retirement rock stars. You know them all very well. David Levine, Kevin Walsh, both are principals with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, how are you today?
We are great, Jeff. Thanks for having us on, the continuing sequestration of ourselves, but it's great to be here with you.
It's great to have you here. And Kevin, I want to come to you. What's top of mind this week for the Eagles? Not the Philadelphia Eagles, the Legal Eagles.
Oh, I was going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles draft. Am I in the wrong podcast?
Yeah, sorry. That's after this one.
My draft coverage is really good. But this week we were going to talk about, the Department of Labor released a whole bunch of guidance really early, I think at 12:08 a.m. on Wednesday morning. And the guidance is designed to really help plan fiduciaries and help participants get through the COVID-19 crisis. And I say helping both because they issued guidance that really seems targeted at both communities. So for plan sponsors and plan fiduciaries, they issued a disaster relief notice, 2020-1. And what it does is it provides some relief for plan fiduciaries in terms of providing notices, the timing of them. And it just acknowledges the reality that, we're in strange times, and it may take longer to get stuff to people. So it does two things. One is it kind of, tells people, do your best to get things quickly, but if you miss your deadline, it's not the end of the world. And second, it kind of provides, it says, if you're a fiduciary and you decide to provide notices through email, text messages, or continuous access websites, that, during this crisis, even if those haven't been blessed in the past by DOL, they might be good enough for now. DOL also provided guidance on loan administration. And here the idea is, if plans aren't in a position to kind of comply with all of DOL's prior loan rules for participants and hardship distributions, including in particular the requirement that loans be adequately secured, because, for example, people are now borrowing 100% of their balance, that, DOL is going to not come after people for technically failing there. And then the other big thing is they kind of announced a compliance approach during the COVID crisis where they've said, we're still an enforcement agency, but during this, we're going to try to emphasize compliance assistance and grace periods where we think it's appropriate, where physical disruption prevents fiduciaries from, satisfying the things that we would typically require them to do. And it encourages plan fiduciaries to, do the best they can given the circumstances. And I think this is pretty helpful because during normal times, it's frustrating when DOL finds plan sponsors liable for foot faults. But during a crisis like this, it's helpful that DOL is acknowledging the reality and saying, we're interested in outcomes more than we're interested in technicalities. David, do you want to provide any color on this, or do you want to talk about the FAQs for the participants?
Well, actually, I think what I was going to do is I was going to jump in and talk a little bit about there are FAQs for participants. To sum it up, a lot of it basically says call your employer. Here's who you talk to if you have questions. Here's where you go. What I wanted to hit on, Kevin, if you'll let me sort of go on a little side trip right now,
is this going to be a different team's NFL draft or totally different topic?
No, I was going to talk about building giant Lego towers with my family while I'm staying at home, but no, it's going to be something else. The Department of Labor used its newly expanded authority under ERISA to really delay some of the deadlines that are really important to participants. And it's important in this guidance to point out that this guidance is very focused on the participant side and the employee side, not as much on some of the administrative side for the employer or sponsor of a plan. There are some items for healthcare and there are some items for retirement. The key that I really think is important to hit is that for claims for benefits, you basically get the period from March 1 till 60 days after the end of the national emergency, which they call the outbreak period. You basically get delays.
It's like straight out of a movie.
It is. It's like
where's Dustin Hoffman?
It's like Contagion. Yes.
I hope Steven Seagal saves us all.
Kevin, this is serious, and instead you're focused on movies. I'm going to get back to serious stuff here, because it's actually a big deal for those plans that have a lot of claims for benefits, or people, whether it's healthcare or retirement plans. It basically says you can bring a claim for benefits, basically that's delayed. So normally, if you have to bring it within 30 or 60 days or a year, in that timeline may apply. All those things are stopped from March 1, so retro to March 1 until 60 days after the emergency. So if you have ideas of claims for benefits, for healthcare benefits, or for appeals on retirement plan benefits, all that's going to be stopped. So if you're a sponsor running your plan, you need to think, okay, how does this impact our statute of limitations language and other items? That's a big deal for dealing with claims. The second big thing, and I'll stop at the second one, is about Cobra. Normally, you get a Cobra notice. There's a wave of lawsuits about not giving good notices, allegedly, these days. I would disagree. But where people can make the election they get a 60-day window to make whether or not they want to continue Cobra after terminating. Well, they basically said that that's open-ended now until 60 days after the end of the national emergency. So if you're an employer, you give the notice, but people may not get back to you and then show up later and say, I want it, and then say, I want you to cover these medical bills. That's a real challenge. It could have cost impacts. It's obviously very friendly in a time of downsizing and people being laid off, and we understand that. But it definitely could throw some wrenches into operations about how you do with things. Also, it gives delays on Cobra premium payments, that if people don't pay it timely, they get a whole grace period to pay their premiums. Normally, people drop out. These are big things to keep in mind, and they're in the DOL IRS combined guidance that came out, and it's essential because this guidance has Q&As. It's the notice Kevin pointed out, but we also have other guidance that came out as part of it in the Federal Register. So there's many different documents, and it's important to keep those in mind as you go forward as an employer. You've got several pieces. I tend to think of the key ones are 3 pieces. So if you're an employer, be aware it's not just the notice. You got some other items to look at as well. So I leave it at that for this week.
Well, Kevin, do you want to talk about your draft while we have a couple minutes left?
I mean, I thought that was a pretty excellent summary. I really thought that at that point, David was going to say, this isn't Steven Seagal, this is more Val Kilmer. And then we could pivot to Top Gun 2, but apparently David wanted to go in a different direction this week.
Actually, Kevin, I wanted to go Fast and Furious, and that's why I did it.
Well, gentlemen, amazing. And, I just said anecdotally, my personal opinion is it's nice to see the Department of Labor is working overtime, and we can see, guidance coming out at 12:08 a.m. So they're burning the midnight oil, and they're providing some real important guidance for all these issues. And I think that's kind of reassuring to so many Americans and so many business owners out there.
But Jeff, I got to add one piece though.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not just the DOL. A bunch of this guidance is IRS, so we have to give them credit too.
I
they had to work together, so we had to get it out together.
I mean, and DOL is working around the clock. I mean, this morning they released additional guidance on Cobra, which is really important in terms of providing people with access to health care during the crisis. So, I mean, I applaud everybody in government who's working hard to help everybody get through this.
Yeah, and my oversight, I didn't mean to exclude our listeners who work at the Internal Revenue Service. What I meant to say is great work by the federal government to address, obviously, some very important concerns. Gentlemen, we'll leave it there. I'll let you go back to building your Lego towers or filling out your draft card for your football draft. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the BRN Sunday podcast. I want to thank Ted Maniatakos very much for sharing his story. Really inspiring, really uplifting. And it's great to see that so many Americans who are quarantined at home are finding new and innovative ways to interact with each other. So, and also thank you, our audience. We really appreciate you stopping by. We're back again tomorrow morning, where I'm going to be joined by David Blanchett from Morningstar. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.